Welcome everyone. My name is Dan Weber, founder of itracks and an active board member of the Prairie chapter of the MRIA. When tasked at our last board meeting with coming up with an idea for an educational event, I immediately thought of your presenter today. He's both a longtime client and friend of mine and is well known throughout the qualitative market research world. The Prairie chapter of the MRIA is excited to have Jeff Walkowski as our presenter today. Jeff is president of Qualitative, a well-known online market research consultancy. As a successful researcher, early adopter of online qualitative methods, longtime trainer of online moderators, and co-editor of Qualitative Research Online, Jeff has played a major role in help shaping the online qualitative industry. Many products and methodologies have been influenced by Jeff's innovative ideas. Jeff has over 25 years of market research experience, in addition to having moderated more than 500 online market research sessions. I can't believe it, Jeff. That's good. You're up there now. Jeff holds an MBA from Southern Methodist University and an MS Education Research and a BA Psychology from Southern Connecticut State University. He is a REVA trainer and is a member and former president of the Qualitative Research Consultants Association. Before I pass this over to Jeff, I'm going to ask that everyone, if you have questions, you type them in the message box below, and during our session, if they fit, we'll try to work them in. But I know Jeff has quite a bit to go through, so if we don't get to them during the webinar, I'll keep track of them, and hopefully we have some time to get through them at the end. So today's webinar is titled Navigating the Evolving World of Online Qualitative, and with that, I will pass it over to you, Jeff.
Thank you, and hello everybody. As Dan mentioned, I've got a lot that I'd like to share with you, so I'm going to get going. And I've got a three-chapter agenda for the presentation today. One will be going over a little bit of the history of the whole online qualitative field, talk about the latest advances that currently exist in the online qualitative arena, and also for those who do already have some online moderating experience, perhaps some moderating tips that will help you strengthen your own skills. So a little bit of something for everybody. And let's go ahead and start with with an intro and some history. And you might wonder, why is he showing me this? Well, a number of reasons. Number one is I am or have been a lifelong reader of Rolling Stone, and I remember one of the first gifts that my mom gave to me when I went away to college was she gave me a subscription to Rolling Stone, and this was many, many, many years ago. And I am a lifelong, as I said, a lifelong reader. And if you look in that, if you're able to see at the bottom, there's an expiration date for when the subscription finishes, and it says something about 2054. So anyway, I've got a very a lifelong subscription to it. But anyway, this is the latest issue. It's got Adele on the cover, and I was just thumbing through it the other day, and further in there was an article on R. Kelly. And R. Kelly, I remember from the song from the 90s, Ignition. And it's one of those songs that if you've heard it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But again, you might be wondering, why is he showing me this? Well, there was this little part of the interview that you see in the circle down below that I'll expand for you. And what he said is that about his own adoption or how he's changed over time. He says music changes, and you can get in line, or you could get left behind. And that's sort of the way many of my peers in the qualitative research industry feel about online qualitative. Qualitative research has changed. Online and technology is the latest thing. You're either going to get in line and take it on, or you have the potential of getting left behind. Maybe not today, but eventually things are moving so quickly that that might be an issue that you'll face if you are a qualitative researcher. Just like 15, 20 years ago, even within QRCA, which Dan mentioned I've been a very long time member of, there were members in QRCA who would shout, well, not literally, but they would give me the evil eye. And and they would say things like, how dare you call them focus groups? It's like, if you can't see people, if you can't hear them, you're losing so much valuable information that you can't possibly get out of those groups what we can get in traditional groups. Since then, that alarmist type of reaction has gone away. There are still a lot of my peers who choose not to get too involved in online, and that's fine. But I'm seeing a number of younger people come into the industry, and they are realizing that online methods it's just a way that people communicate, and our whole objective as qualitative researchers is to make people comfortable so that they could share with us whatever it is that they have to share. And if people enjoy talking online, communicating online, then we need to reach out to them and meet them at least more than halfway and provide them a means of communicating with us online as well. So it may come as a surprise to some of you, but online qualitative is not quite 20 years old, but within a couple years at the most, we could comfortably say that that online qualitative is well out of its teen years and well into adulthood. So a bit of history. It was in the mid-90s that online chats were born, and you got this cute little baby here, and I, for one, was really excited about it. And these online chats were the first things out there, and any of us who were practicing or dipping our toes into online qualitative at the time, what we remember is America Online chat rooms. And they were okay, but they certainly didn't have, they had a number of challenges associated with them, which I don't have time to go over with you, and I love to tell stories about my first experiences with doing focus groups on AOL in those days, but they were quickly supplanted by like 96 or 97 with technology that was adapted. Chat room technology was adapted to meet the needs. They were created specifically for marketing researchers, qualitative researchers, and what they created was very similar to what we're all accustomed to as traditional researchers. There was a set time and date for everybody to meet. These chats lasted about 90 minutes, which was shorter than an in-person group, but still in the same ballpark. It was a discussion led by a moderator. There were 6 or 7 people who participated, and we paid them an incentive after it was done. And of course, it was all geared around marketing issues that our clients wanted us to address. So it makes sense that when the inventors of online chat rooms came into being, they thought, well, let's give the market what they are most accustomed to. Let's give them an online analog to in-person focus groups. But a few years passed, and then message boards appeared. And remember that little baby that I showed you a few slides earlier? That's the kid on the right. He's grown up a little bit, and he's got a baby brother or sister, and that baby brother or sister is message boards. And it was almost an afterthought. Some of the thinking was, well, is there a way to do an extended online chat? There were listservs, and I don't have time now to get into a lengthy discussion. If you listservs are basically, they don't really exist anymore, but they were a way for people to be tied together and having an extended conversation with each other. It was all geared around email, but it was extremely clumsy and very difficult to figure out who's responding to who. When this latest email that came in, what's it in response to, and how do I sort through all these things? So message boards were actually developed as an alternative to that, and we all thought that they were little more than long versions of online chats, but we discovered after a couple of few years, the people that, myself and others who were involved in it, that we were getting way more depth than we could possibly get in a real-time chat, and in many cases even more depth than we could get in an in-person focus group. And we discovered that it was so much easier finding people who were really busy to avail themselves and allow themselves to be part of the marketing research process. So they came into being. So this slide is just a quick overview of the and I'm not going to go over the details, but a couple key things here if you're not already familiar with them. But there's basically two branches of online qualitative. One is synchronous, and these are the things that take place in real time. Everybody is together, versus asynchronous, where things are broken up. These last over typically days rather than just 90 minutes, and nobody needs to be there at the same time. But they all work in their own ways. And what you could see is that one of the things I'd like to point out is that over here in the synchronous area, ever since 2010, there's been more and more platform providers that offer us video capabilities, but that actually goes back to shortly after 2000. And by the way, these numbers, where these items are placed on the timeline isn't exact. It's just the general timeline to show you the actual flow of things. But the point I wanted to make is that video chats have been around for way more than 10 years, but they didn't really take off because the broadband wasn't as developed, not as many people had it, and also webcams weren't as advanced as they are now. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a webcam that is not HD. So that in the past, without broadband, you got a very grainy image. Images were very choppy, and it was difficult to really tell what was going on. You might as well have just had a photograph of the person rather than a video image. But let me go on. Just a quick recap here of the main differences between offline and online. And yes, there are weaknesses as well to both of these, but what I'd like you to realize here is that as much as I am applauding and a big cheerleader for online, and of course it's a big part of my practice, but there are times and places for offline as well. And I purposely came up with an even number of strengths and other advantages of both online and offline methods. And I think most of this will be self-explanatory, but I would like to concentrate on just a couple of the advantages as I see them to online. One of the biggest things for me that I'm a big fan of is the anonymity that comes with text-based online methods. These text-based methods are to be contrasted with video chats. Video chats are great. They're the closest thing that we have online to an in-person focus group. You could see people, you could hear them, and the added advantage of video chats is that people are in the comfort of their home or office, wherever they want to be, and that's the whole idea, make people comfortable. So it's got really real advantages there. But in terms of the text-based, the anonymity of respondents really allows people to, even more than in an in-person situation or even in a video chat, say exactly what's on their mind. Sometimes respondents in a text-based chat or bulletin board will be brutally honest, more honest with us than they might possibly be, than they probably would be in an in-person type of situation. So I'm a big fan of online, specifically for the anonymity that it provides. Of course, you've heard about the greater geographic spread, and it's great for low incidence groups where you don't think you'll be able to pull off a pair of groups in a given market, but if you expand it to an entire region, sure, there's enough people if we do it online. And this whole idea of being more democratic, and what I mean by that is that we have there's less opportunity for for a group to get into what I'll call groupthink. Doesn't mean that it can't happen online, but everybody's got an equal voice. That's the point that I'm trying to make here. You can imagine that somebody who comes across very strong in an in-person focus group might intimidate those around them. And yes, it's the job of the moderator to hold those people in check. But online, you can't see people, so things like gender, things like ethnicity, age, accent, all of those types of things go away because everybody has an equal voice. So that's one of the things that really gets me excited about online and what keeps me involved in it. So that's it for some history. Let me let me get into a section of talking about the latest advances in all three of these areas: the real-time chats, the message boards, and the video chats. I will pay attention to them as well. So let me talk about chats first. I've got these two pictures here, and basically things have moved over the past almost 20 years from some very basic functionality, which is equivalent to bread and water to eat, to something these days where you could get not only, you get a really nice dessert with all those different layers and flavors in them, and not only that, but you have your choice of beverage to go with it, nice cup of coffee. So I'm a foodie, and you'll often hear me making analogies to food, but things that you see on the left, most of us who are coming into the online field would take for granted now because it looks they look so common sense. But there was a time when we did not have a virtual waiting room. Whoever we invited, they showed up, and it became kind of awkward if we over-recruited to tell people, would you please leave because we don't need you. But now we have waiting rooms that allow us to do that. Observation rooms, we didn't always have them. In the olden days, we had to have observers come in but promise to be quiet and not type anything. That was a challenge, a client management problem. But now we've got observation rooms that keep them at bay, and they could talk all they want without infringing on the conversation that the moderator is having with its respondents. It used to be that in the early days I had to have an open Word document, and I would cut and paste my questions from the Word document over to the chat stream, and that was actually faster than free-form keyboarding of questions. And you can see the list of things there. I'm not going to go over each one, but there are many capabilities now that bring them as close as possible to being on par with what can be done in real-time focus groups. So these are available in text-based chats. And what I'm going to do now is show you some, let me just refer to my notes here. I actually want to go back just a second and go back to this slide about the history, and just let you know that if you're not already familiar with it, if you'd like to read about the history of online qual and who the movers and shakers were and that type of thing, there's a real good book that just came out about a year ago by Susan Abbott and Jennifer Dale. Susan Abbott is both a QRCA member, and I'm pretty sure is an MRIA member as well. She resides in the Toronto area. The name of the book is Qual Online. That's Qual-Online, The Essential Guide. Very easy to read, very practical, very informative, and I recommend that if you want to get some more information on the history, as well as a lot of tips on what to do in online qualitative. So let's get back going to the chats, and now I'm going to show you some screenshots that demonstrate some of the enhancements that have been made over the years to chats. And this, I'm sure, is going to probably be of more interest to those of you who have not done any online qualitative, specifically chats. And I want to give a shout out to itracks. They provided me with all the screenshots that I'll be showing you in this section of the presentation. So here is the waiting room, and this is the moderator's view. And what the moderator sees is who's in the room at the time, and that WR means that they are in the waiting room. And you can see this is the conversation that people are having. And it's up here in this drop-down box, and it's not a. This is a static screenshot, but if I was to click on that box, I could go to the back room, the observer room. I could go to the main room, which is where the actual conversation will take place, and that kind of thing. And as if it doesn't look like we've got an over recruit situation here. We've got 5 people. Typically, I run a group from anywhere from 6 to 8 people. I myself can't take any more than that. It's just too much information for me. If I had an overabundance of people, I would just put a check mark in front of the names of the people that I want to accept, and I'd say start the group, and then I'd move over to the main room where all of these people will have been sent. And the people who we don't need anymore because we've over-recruited, they would remain in the waiting room, and the tech support person would chat with them and say, look, sorry you can't get in, but we didn't know how many people we're going to show, and we thank you very much for your time, and you are going to get paid, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just a quick example of the waiting room. Here's the main discussion room, and again, you've got a big area over here that allows the chat stream to occur. Of course, there's different colors for the moderator just to set it off and to help the observers as well as the respondents know, okay, who's talking now? I need to pay attention to the moderator. And there is a moderator's guide that's pre-built in. Basically, we copy and paste that from a Word document to the platform so that all I need to do is click on this post, and instead of having to type all this or copy and paste from a Word document, it's already there. I click post and it will appear in the chat stream. Actually, you could see it here. Here is what was just posted, and here's where it appears. And here are some the questions that are coming up. So that's the main discussion screen. We can show stimuli to people in a chat, and here it is built into the moderator's guide so that when it's time for me to show as a moderator, I would just click it, and I have a choice of opening up a new window if it's something big, and in this case you could tell by it looks like a banner ad or something of that sort, or a widescreen advertisement of something. We'd probably want it to appear as a new window on their screen, so I as the moderator can control when it appears and when I take it away. And when I'm ready to talk about it, I'll take it away and then I'll launch a question, and then our respondents would talk about it. And so here's an example of it. If it was, in this particular case, in this screenshot, it looks a bit small to me. Now, if this was on your own screen, it would appear larger because I've shrunk this down to appear on the slide. And I'd probably show this on a separate window. But me, from my moderator screen, this is just showing me what I am showing so that I could concentrate on what's being said in the chat stream. I could also poll people in a chat. And of course, this is a quantitative type of question, but we're doing qualitative work. Just as most of us probably do in a focus group, occasionally we'll have people give an interest rating or they'll score a concept on a particular scale. And the purpose isn't really to get those scores, it's just to get them to commit to an answer and to get a temperature read from the room in terms of where they see this idea going, and we use it as a launching pad for further discussion. And not only that, but having these types of using these types of tools and is more engaging. It's not more engaging. It just makes the process for our respondents a little more fun and engaging, and it gets into that gamification type of thing that we hear about that's used a lot in all types of all types of research, both qual and quant. And here's a case where we could do ad testing, and in this case it's a video. I could tell because this is a timeline, and this is where along maybe the 60-second continuum this ad is showing. But while it's showing, you could have your respondent, use one of these tools to mark something on the ad and then even include some information. This is the equivalent of them taking some notes while they are viewing a video for an ad and that type of thing. But the point here is that we could show video as well, and not only that, but capture more than just comments that are made in the chat room, but extra stuff that people can mark up, just like we have them do with concepts in a real-time focus group. Excuse me, in an in-person focus group. So that's just gives you a quick taste of what's going on in the chat arena, or what the capabilities are. Now let's talk about what some of the latest capabilities are in terms of message boards. And again, just as remember, I showed you that the bread and water, moving from bread and water to a nice piece of cake. Well, we got bells and whistles that over the years have been added to boards as well, and things that couldn't be done or weren't available to us like 10, 15 years ago, and I might be wrong on the dates, but approximately that time period. There wasn't a way for respondents to upload media. It's not like today they could so easily snap a picture and include it in a message board. with some extra information along with it. They can even record a video of themselves responding to a question. We have total control over if and when a respondent will see a respondent's post to a given question. And we have control on that on a question-by-question basis throughout the course of the discussion. And for example, if I'm asking a very sensitive question, perhaps about income or something that's perhaps very personal, and even in an anonymous situation, as in an online message board, there may be some things that some people would still be uncomfortable sharing with a wider group. So we could limit, if at all, anybody will see any of that. We could put people into subgroups, males and females. We have a day of discussion on one altogether, and then we split the males and the females up and have them tackle an issue, and then bring them back together on Sunday, on the third day, and see what we got out of that. We could also integrate polling technology in this, again, to make things a bit more engaging for our respondents, and things have gone mobile. Some of the platform providers, namely itracks, have developed a mobile-based tool. It's the same thing as doing it on a desktop, and they both can be used interchangeably. Fourth section I'd like to go over before we get into before I open things up for Q&A, and at this point we're going to talk about moderating tips. Now, the whole reason for this is that I and many of my peers, when we first got involved in online qual, thought, oh, it's the same as doing an in-person focus group. Well, I quickly learned that it's not the same. Questions are asked in different ways, and even when we're talking about text-based chats, text-based methods, chats versus message boards, there's different ways of asking questions there as well. And there's just a whole host of different moderator behaviors. And what I tell people who have not done this before is that when you moderate an online focus group, you need every skill you already have as an in-person focus group moderator, plus some other things. So that's really critical, and that's why I offer an online moderator training course, because those who have realized and faltered and had a difficult time doing these things, they realize that there are best practices to up their game and maximize the outputs that they get from those studies. So, in terms of tips, I have a set of tips for chats and a set of tips for boards. I don't have any tips for video chats because they are so similar to how you run to how you moderate an in-person focus group that, like, in my hand, I could summarize the tips for you. Basically, it is the closest thing to moderating an in-person focus group. And if you're scared about doing any online qualitative, my recommendation would be start with a video chat, because it's the method that you'll feel most comfortable with. So my focus here in this presentation will focus on just a handful of tips for chats as well as for message boards. I actually have a whole other presentation that I could do on chats and message boards where I come up with like more than a dozen tips for each, but we don't have time for that now. So I'm just going to give you a taste of a couple tips in each of 3 buckets. The 3 buckets have to do, for chats, with managing the flow, inspiring participation, and humanizing the experience for your respondents. Flow is a real critical thing, because if you've seen these things before, if you've heard people before, sometimes a question will be asked, a moderator will ask a question, and then their responses come in to the previous question. It looks really disjointed and very difficult for, and it makes it quite confusing. So you want to manage the flow. Inspiring participation, it's not only that, but maybe inspiring interaction. People will definitely respond to the question that the moderator asks, but will they pay attention to what the other people are saying? This is a challenge for online moderating, and there are some things that could be done to inspire that level of interaction. And finally, humanizing the experience. We can't see them, we can't hear them, we can't smell them, we can't wink at them, we can't smile, and yet these are people, and we want them to feel like people. What can we do to make it that way? So a couple tips from each bucket. Let's start with managing the flow. Two quick tips here are delivering guidelines and providing transitions. The first, delivering guidelines, and I'm not going to go over each of these, but these are guidelines that I don't have to even mention in an in-person focus group. But because chats are so different than what people are typically accustomed to, and because of the freedom that they feel that they have in an anonymous environment like this, I need to lay down some guidelines up front to make sure that things go as efficiently as possible. And the one thing that I'd like to talk just a second, well, maybe a few seconds, is this number 6. In the past, if I did not include this rule, then people would like blast each other. They would put each other down. Why? Because they didn't have the fear of social repercussions of saying something nasty. They were being honest. They were telling us how they felt, but they didn't do it in a nice way. And now for the past like 5, 7, 8 years since I implemented this new guideline, I don't have to, or it's very, very seldom, maybe once every 2 or 3 years, do I get a respondent who is really being bad, and I have to send them a private message saying, hey, remember my guideline about not being disrespectful to other people? You're on the verge, you are doing that, and if you don't stop, I'm going to kick you out, and you're not going to get your incentive. When I have to do that, and I repeat, it's done very rarely, they automatically fall into line. They tell us what they think, but they do it in a respectful way. So clear guidelines is one way to manage the flow. And also this last one, I just started doing in the past year or two. People, because we can't see them, they could play on their phones, they could take phone calls, they could have the TV going, they could maybe be doing a video game on the side, they could engage in many things, but I tell them, come on, focus on this, because I could tell, especially if it's a game night, I might ask a question that requires nothing more than a yes or no answer, which should only take seconds, but it might take 20 or 30 seconds for people to answer, and if many people are doing that, I know they are getting distracted, and I say, uh-oh, remember rule number 9, and I'll show that to them, and usually in time they'll get the hang of it, and they'll know that I need them to really focus. Transitions, again, to try to minimize the occurrence of people answering questions after you ask the next question. These are some things that I do, and my favorite is this one down here, which is what I call a clear the decks transition question. I actually ask them, are you ready to move on? I'll say, I've got all I need here, I'm ready to move on, are you? So what that means is that if somebody's still typing, they'll get that out and they'll get it up to me quickly. And there are tools, especially on itracks, that tells me, is somebody writing? Are they keyboarding and they still haven't posted yet? And I'm able to control that. So I'm able to make sure that I'm not asked that the responses that I'm getting really are very clearly delineated in the transcript, and I know what question each answer is in response to. So let's move on to another bucket, the Inspire Participation bucket. And here it's the things to do is to set a good pace, don't go too fast, don't go too slow, and fostering interaction. One of our in the training program that we provide, the piece of advice that we warn our students about ahead of time when they prior to them having their practice sessions of doing a chat is we tell them, slow down. You might think you need to move fast, but you don't. And some key things to do is like read everything, and sometimes read it out loud, because reading it out loud is slower, it takes longer than just skimming it over. And think in terms of if you're going too fast and you don't keep up with what's being read, then most likely your respondents aren't either. And if they don't have a chance to pay attention to what other people are saying, then they can't interact with them. And they're basically just keeping their noses above the water, waiting for your next question, reacting to it, giving you their answer, taking a quick breath, and waiting for your next one. But if you relax and let people take their time to not only respond, but to read others' responses as well, then that goes a long way toward keeping a good pace, keeping them comfortable, and actually encouraging some interaction. And in terms of that point about fostering interaction, I'll not warn, but in terms of guidelines, remember, I'll say, don't just answer my questions, but talk to each other. I'll tell them this and I might even tell them this in the invite that goes out. Okay, you're scheduled for this. We're looking forward to seeing you. This is what you're going to need to click on to get here, and just a few guidelines for you is don't just pay attention to me, blah, 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 blah. And another way to get people to interact is if somebody said something interesting, I'll say, like, Joe just said blah, 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 and I'll like copy and paste what he said, and I said, do you agree or disagree with this post? Or I might not copy and paste the text. I'll force my respondents to look up to see Joe's post to see what he said. It's like training them to pay attention to what others. And here's another one. It's like, okay, we just did a little mini idea generation thing, or there were a lot of comments. Scroll up and review the ideas mentioned. Which ones appeal to you a lot? Forcing them to pay attention to what other people are saying. Again, this comes naturally in an in-person group, but online, especially in a chat, it needs to be encouraged. Finally, we've got our Humanize bucket. And basic things here are be a good host and use respondents' names. By being a good host, I go to the waiting room. I am there early. I announce myself. I welcome them. I say, hey, early birds, thanks for coming. Usually they'll be good about exchanging pleasantries with each other, but they might ask, how long is this going to be? What's the topic? And they'll ask other people, have you done this before? What's going to happen? Am I going to get paid? And it's just nice to be there to reassure them before we actually start the group that you're going to do that. And just as a good host, once you get into the actual session, just make sure that people are comfortable. I go over the guidelines. I typically say, okay, you're in the main room now. I'm going to take a few minutes to go over some stuff. Just sit back and read along. I tell them that. Just sit back and read along. Use respondents' names throughout the discussion. Remember, this is a chat. And in the training sessions that I do, this often comes up. Our respondents will compliment the moderators if they mention their name. So I, at the end, as a follow-up, say, why is it important to ask more questions of people by name? And this is a collection of responses we've gotten from the consumers who have participated in our training groups, and they say things like this. It shows that you are paying attention, not just to what we're saying, but to who says it. And it keeps us personally involved, because remember, we can't see them, we can't match eyes with them, we can't nod at them. Those are the things we do in person that acknowledges them. The only way we could, one of the best ways of doing that in a chat is to actually mention their name. It's like, oh, I'm in the limelight, he just mentioned my name. So that's a good thing to do. So we've got to press on. I want to go over some quick tips for boards. And again, we've got 3 different buckets here, but the buckets are slightly different. Here we're talking about inspiring participation, cultivating interaction, and humanizing the experience. It's different in this situation. So let me go over them each, and let's start with inspire. And I'll go over these 2 really quickly. One is be omnipresent, or give the impression of being omnipresent. I typically, when I'm running boards, I work out of my home, but even if you work in an office, I would log on like one of the first things you do when you get up. I'm usually on from 7 a.m. to 11, but not the whole 7 to 11. I just drop in at the beginning, make sure I'm there late at night, and I intersperse my presence throughout the day. And by asking probes, they know that you're there. And all these platforms have a timestamp on every post, so respondents will get a feel. Oh, this guy or this moderator is really here all the time. And oftentimes at the end of a message, they'll say, "You were here all the time. What did you do?" They didn't know that I would take an hour or 2 break. It just looked like I was there. So up with the rooster, out with the owls. And in terms of an even workload, when it says moderator goal here, this is the moderator's goal for the respondents. Try to create a message, try to develop a discussion guide that will even the workflow throughout the days. And the first thing I feel is really critical. If you tell people up front to expect to spend 30 to 40 minutes or whatever the time period might be each day. You need to stick to that. If you tell them 30, 40 and you give them an hour's worth of work, there are some people who might say, whoa, this is way more than you told me it was going to be. I don't care what the incentive is. I'm dropping out. That's the last thing you want to happen. And sometimes, if anything, I will lighten the load on day one to give them to hook them. It's like, oh, this wasn't as bad as I thought. And then they come in, and once they do day two, of course, they're going to want that incentive, and they know they need to do day three. But out of respect, I'll tell them, I went a little light today on day one. We'll have to do a little bit more tomorrow. Just wanted to prepare you for that. You're being transparent with them. And again, that's a good thing. Okay, let's cultivate some interaction. One of the things that I do, I set what I call achievable goals. And I do that a number of times. Once, when I send out the instructions before the group even begins, I tell them that I'm going to want them to react to others' posts. And in the introduction, on the very first day that it begins, I tell them, I remind them that you're going to see each other's posts, and I want you to take advantage of them. And this is something that I started doing in the past few years. I include this statement: I challenge you to post at least 2 other posts to others in the discussion each day. Some people will do it naturally. Some will take it on as a challenge. But what you're doing here is you're training them. Oh, it wasn't so bad. And at the end of each day, I'll ask a little question in a closing comment. I say, have you met the challenge of responding to 2 other people? All you're doing is training them, and once they get in the habit, it's like, oh, that wasn't so bad. And perhaps when you respond to somebody, they respond back. Oh, it's not just me talking with the moderator, but I could interact with these other people, and they'll talk back with me too. It's like a pat on the back, and that makes it feel very, very comfortable for them. Here's another example of rewarding interaction. What happened was Lois introduced herself, and I welcomed Lois, and Lois responded to that, but then Glory responded to Lois's post about the introduction. It's like, oh, I have something in common with you. And when that happens at the beginning, this is almost a stock response that I give, and I'll do this maybe a couple times, and I'll say this is exactly like what I want to see panelists talking spontaneously to others. And I call out Glory. It's, in other words, pat her on the back, mention her name. She read somebody else's post, and something she read resonated, so she commented on it. I challenge all of you to do the same, make it a point to do the same at least twice a day. And respondents see it. Again, it's like he didn't just say it for the sake of saying that he wanted us to do it, but he's paying attention and likes when this happens. So last topic is humanizing the experience. Here are the 2 that I'm going to go over. And one of the key things that I do very first day, and I'm probably more attentive on the first day than I am on the second and the third, because I want to be omnipresent, and I want to show that I am paying attention to each and every person. Every time that a person introduces themselves, I follow up with a welcome and some kind of comment that signals that I actually read what they said. Again, that helps personalize the experience a little bit. It lets them know that I am paying attention and that everything that they tell me is valuable information for me. And finally, embrace humor. You don't have to be a stand-up. You don't have to be a person who knows how to tell jokes. But if you have a respondent in your group who does, I applaud them. I'll do like a to everybody type of question like you saw me do earlier, and I'll say, this is great, it's great to break the monotony, I really appreciate it, and it kind of encourages a bit of humor, and it just makes things more engaging for our respondents. So almost ready to wrap up, and if we are all on that lower ladder, which is in-person focus groups, there's that other ladder. It's dangling on the side. It's for the online focus groups, and I encourage you to jump for it and grab it and adapt to the change that is going on very strongly. So before I close, it is, yes, a shameless plug, but I do run this course with a colleague of mine. Basically, we take experienced in-person moderators and spend a week with them in a distance learning situation training them to adapt their skills to the online environment. If you go to the website, and it's listed up there, you'll see that the next class is slated for the 18th through the 22nd, but there is a course that is specifically and exclusively set up for MRI members. They have first crack at this. It is the week prior to this one. We feel that it's a good week. There's probably going to be less work that you're doing before the year really sets in. Go ahead and do it. It is distance learning. That means there's no travel involved. We do limit it to 8 students, and there is a cost, of course. The full retail value is, I think, $25.95, but there are discounts available that help you bring that down. Remember, limited to 8 students, and sign up for that. And let's see. And I am open to questions.
Awesome, Jeff. That's a great presentation and very informative. So now I would like to invite anyone to go ahead and in the chat frame add any questions, and Jeff will go ahead and ask them. I have one here, Jeff, that you may want to approach. Is, are you able to have more than one moderator in a group, perhaps
Yes.
first-time moderators?
Yes, you can. Yeah, I've never done that before, but it certainly can be done, especially if, for example, are you talking chats or message boards or both? I should have asked that to clarify.
It didn't say here, but I assume any of them. My guess is if it's a first-time moderator that they're looking for some support.
Yes, and actually one of the things that one of the tips that I have for new moderators, especially the chats, because the chats are really intense, and if you've not done them before, it's just like the time flies. And what I typically do is, it's not so much having another moderator on, but I have somebody keyboard for me. And I did this when I broke my arm and I couldn't type. So I read and I dictated responses, and that actually, what I discovered in that is that it actually helped me keep my eyes more on the conversation, because I am somewhat of a touch typist, but my eyes do go down so I could see where my fingers are. And anytime I take my eyes away from the screen, I'm taking my attention away from the conversation. But yes, in both situations you could have multiple moderators. I think you'd want to work out with each other how that will work, and you'd want to let your respondents know, hey, we're tag teaming this, and this is the way it's going to work. And in a message board, maybe it's a lengthy message board, maybe it's lasting a whole week, and maybe one moderator is scheduled for whatever, for a whole day, and they have another one step in, rather than the other moderator could step in as the first one, so it's transparent to the respondents. But it's amazing what respondents will pick up if the probes have a different style, if there's a different word choice or whatever. They might even recognize that there's something different about that different moderator, even though it says the same name, it might be different. So anyway, hopefully that helped. For sure.
I have another one here. Do you have any examples of when you would choose one method over the other?
Yes, a quick, and I'm going to differentiate between chats and boards. Boards are really good for lengthy answers, deep thought, deep thinking, whereas chats are good for sound bites. And chats, I feel, are best suited to really quick concept reactions, ad testing, that kind of thing, because that's where, especially with ad testing, we want quick gut level responses. We don't want people to overthink things too much. If I showed you an ad in a message board and gave you an opportunity to answer it instantaneously, or 5 minutes from now or 5 hours from now, I'll bet you your gut reaction may be different than your response after thinking about it for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 5 hours. So if you want to get closer to the truth, my feeling is chats are best for those quick level reactions. Good for message boards are great for storytelling. If you're going to want to get in-depth information and you want people to share their lengthy answers to whatever meaning of life types of questions, or tell me everything you can remember about the last time you purchased a washing machine, what was involved in that you need a lengthy answer, and that's where message boards really come into play. So those are just two quick off-the-cuff types of instances when it's easy for me to differentiate when to use one versus the other.
This is one, it's a bit humorous, but do you have any tips on helping me convince my clients to investigate these methods?
Yes. One quick thing to do is if they're more comfortable with in-person, then suggest like a side-by-side comparison where there's minimal risk to them. Because what's going on is they're doubting whether they're going to get the same information and draw the same conclusions using an online method. And I did this earlier on. Here in the U.S., I think it's more commonly accepted and there's less resistance to it. But I'll say, okay, well let's do them both, and let's start with the in-persons that you're most that you're comfortable with, and then I'll develop a guide that as closely as possible mirrors what was done in person, and we'll develop that for either an online chat or a message board. In the past, and this has been at least 10 years ago, but I did 3, 4, maybe 5 of these types of projects, and at the end, and what I tell clients now is that I've done this 4 or 5 times before, and my clients, they look at the results and it's like they would not make a different decision based on the output that we got from the 2 methods. It's like we heard the same things, and so it's low risk. And it enables them to feel more comfortable about just saying, okay, well, this next project, let's just go all online. And they could stretch their budgets to go online because you're eliminating travel.
Wonderful. Well, that's all of the questions that we have right now, Jeff, and we are at the end of our time. I certainly appreciate you speaking here, and thank you for everyone for attending today. Jeff is available. He has, do you have your contact information on the next page there, Jeff? Or maybe go back to your, feel free to reach out to him for any other questions related to moderating, and certainly I do encourage anyone to take his course. It is a wonderful course if you're looking at advancing your knowledge in this area. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.